everyone. Welcome to the course Management and its Evolution. My name is Neha and I would be your mentor for this particular session. So this is Unit 2, Management and its Evolution. We have learned in Unit 1, Management and the overview of it. So now we'll go ahead with the Unit 2 and we'll learn about how the evolution of management took place. So let me take you to the objective for the section today. So these are the objectives that are listed over here. We would be learning about the various perspectives of management, the philosophy and the approaches of management. At that time, what were the ideas of various thinkers of management, about the scientific management and the principles of scientific management, the contribution of behavioral science to the management, and different approaches like contingency approach, systems approach, decision theory approach, and other approaches to the management. So let's begin. So there are different perspectives of management, which are listed over here. So first is empirical or classical perspective, human relations approach or the behavioral approach, systems approach, decision theory approach, mathematical or quantitative approach, contingency approach, theory X and theory Y, right? So we will study about each of them in the upcoming slides. Let's move forward. So the very first one listed here is empirical or classical perspective. We'll begin with that. The classical perspective of management. So classical perspective of management comprises of three things: scientific management, administrative theory, and bureaucracy, right? So let's study about each of them in brief. Scientific management. Who has given scientific management, right? So okay, so we'll study with the scientific management, which is a type of a classical management, classical theory of management. So scientific management was given by F.W. Taylor, right? And he is also known as father of scientific management. What was the idea behind scientific management? The idea was to improve the manufacturing efficiency through more effective utilization of physical and human resources, right? Manufacturing efficiency. And it was proposed by F.W. Taylor, who is considered as father of scientific management. This is a thing that you need to remember throughout the entire life, right? This is like a given thing, father of scientific management, F.W. Taylor. So he has observed that the best management is true science, resting upon clearly defined laws, rules, and principles as a foundation. So he has believed the foundation should be laws and rules and certain principles. And he spent his entire life, to find the problem of management, find the solution of management problems to achieve greater efficiency. Okay. He was really passionately interested in the efficiency of working methods. He initially realized that the systematic analysis of work would find a solution to all the problems. So he went ahead with that and he has published his work in an article called Principles of Scientific Management in 1911. उसके बाद he was the first person to recognize and emphasize the need for adopting a scientific approach to the task of an enterprise. So there are certain elements of scientific management, and he has defined 4 principles of management, right? Okay, so firstly, you guys understand what is scientific management, right? It is the process of applying scientific principles to management related problems. And there are 4 principles of management that is given by F.W. Taylor, and these are listed here. The very first one is develop a science for each element of an individual works. This means replacing the role of thumb work method with methods based on scientific study of task, right? Because his basic focus was how he can make the process better. So the first principle he gave regarding that, to remove the thumb work and focus on the scientific study. Prior to this, workers use approximation method. Then second one is scientifically select, train, teach, and develop each worker. And before he gave this principle, there was no training given to the workers, and it was believed that they would train themselves. Heartily cooperate with the workers. So, in accordance with the principle of science, he has developed a cooperation between the workers, before which management and workers were in continuously conflict. And the fourth principle he gave is the divide the work and responsibility equally between management and workers. So prior to this, management would take over all the work for which it is better suited than the workers, which means that the managers would apply the scientific management principles to planning the work and workers actually perform the task. So this is what he wanted. And prior to this, work and greater part of responsibility was left to workers while the management used to rest. So that's what he brought to the table by giving us the scientific management and the principles of it. So he did an experiment, actually three big iron experiment, the science of shoveling and bricklaying experiment. He did it for to study about time. For time study, he did three types of experiment: pig iron experiment, science of shoveling, and bricklaying. So what is pig iron experiment? So Taylor argued that if workers were asked to move 12.5 tons of pig iron per day and could be induced to move 4 times of the same per day, they would get exhausted and fail to reach the goal. According to him, if the works manager could conduct an experiment and arrive at a standard time for their rest work, they would physical abilities could be used to the optimum. The worker would also be segregated based on their ability and level of performance to do the job. So he wanted basically for the managers to identify the standard time for the work and for the rest of the workers. For that's why he did the pig iron experiment. Times of shoveling. So in another study, Taylor used the time studies again to determine that the optimal weight that a worker should lift in a shovel was 21 pounds. So, what is the optimal weight according to the science of shoveling that the worker could lift at once? It is 21 pounds. So, Taylor found that the density of material are different and hence the size of shovels should also be appropriate. And based on these experiments, he found out that the workers could be optimally used on the shop floors using scientific methods. And the next he did was bricklaying experiment. So, taking clue from Taylor, the Gilbert's bricklaying experiment proved a significant increase in number of motions required to lay the brick. So they used the picture technology to do the experiment. So the first two are done by Taylor, while the bricklaying experiment was done by Gilbert, but the clue was taken from the Taylor only. So that was the experiments all about. So criticism. So despite of all that, the scientific management faced such certain criticism, like everything. So the very first one is ignoring the creativity and innovation of workers. So scientific management insisted on one way of doing the job. So that ignored the creativity and innovations that workers can take while being and or while doing the job. Next one is work getting fragmented with narrow specialization. This means that workers are assigned the task and given on the basis of what managers think they can do. Right? They could not put on their specialization, their another expertise because they're already allocated based on their one particular specialization. So that was the sole basis of assigning the work to the workers. Repetitive and boring. Analysis of the job led to work getting fragmented. Also, the work was boring because there are certain principles and rules on how to do the job, and it was doing repetitively. So that became boring and monotonous for the worker. And insecurity among workers. So management emphasized on the design and planning of the job that ignored worker and experience, which also made them feel a bit of insecure. Also, the rule of thumb method made workers feel insecure in the name of scientific standard given by the management. Let's move ahead. Administrative theory. So it was given by Henry Fayol, and he gave 14 management principles. The very first one is division of work or division of labor. So this was the very first principle given by Henry Fayol. Fayol observed division of work, which means that a worker is given only some elements of work to take advantage of specialization. Work should be divided for each worker depending upon their specialization. Since the worker repeats the same task, the manager corrects him The worker acquires an ability and accuracy by doing the same task again and again, which would ultimately increase the output and the efficiency of the workers. So that was the idea behind giving this principle of division of work and labor. Next one is balancing authority and responsibility. Authority would provide the right to command to get the work done. So people at a who has got the authority, they would be getting the right to command to get the work done. And responsibility, the accountability of the authority, and arises out of the assignment of activity. So he believes that if there would be equal balance of authority and responsibility, the work would be done without any conflict. Discipline. According to Fuel, discipline is obedience, energy, mark of respect, as shown by behavior of employees in accordance with employment contracts and rules. So, discipline, it is derived by recognizing authority to secure compliance and is bound by rules, regulation, culture. Fuel believes that if there are certain discipline that is followed by worker, it would help in the achievement of goals and objectives nicely and effectively rather than just making people come at whatever. So okay, take the example, if people have a certain time to come into work and certain out time, they would be disciplined, unlike the people who would be reporting at 2 p.m. and leaving at 4. That would not help the management to achieve the goals that are set. Unity of command, it means that employees should receive orders from one superior only, so that there is no confusion on whose order to follow and whose order to follow on a priority basis, right? If they're receiving order from only one plane, it would help one person. It would help in making things clear, and there would be clarity between both employer and the employee. Unity of direction. So this principle is concerned with functioning of organization and respect of its grouping of activities. The activities with the same objective in an organization are grouped together and they must have one head and one plan, which ensures better coordination among the activities. Subordination of individual interest to general interest. Individuals as members of organization are bound by the organizational interest. So everyone has their own interest and again they have the organizational interest. And whenever the conflict is between to follow the one's own interest and organizational interest, individual interests should not prevail over that of organization. That is what the subordination of individual interest to general interest says. Remuneration of personnel. The method of payment and remuneration should be fair, and the worker should be satisfied with the remuneration they are giving. This would help. Also, the employer should give the fair financial incentive to the employees so that they can also feel good and can contribute towards the centralization. Fuel refers to this principle as the extent to which authorities concentrated, right? Authorities concentrated on the top. A delicate balance of power and distribution of power should be used, and the objective should be to utilize the talent available in organization so that authority and responsibility are retained. Scalar chain. So scalar chain means line of authority from top management to the lowest rank. This is what scalar chain simply means. So communication flow should flow through this chain only from top to bottom. And it can be skipped only when it is detrimental to the organization. So it is was suggested by Fuel that top to bottom communication channel should be followed. And it can be broken only when there is no other choice left. Order. Order refers to arrangement of things and people, that there is a meaning that there is a place for everything and everything should be in place. There are certain places for everything. So all the resources should be kept at the place where it is designed to be kept. Equity, it is a combination of justice and kindness. So if an organization demonstrates equity in treatment and behavior, the company is admired, right? But if the organization doesn't show equity, the company no one would like to go to that company. So equity ensures cordial relation also between the management and the workers, which would lead to good health of the organization. Stability of tenure. So it is a reasonable security of job. Turnover is good, so we all know how much turnover and layoffs are happening. And one of the causes is also the inefficient management. Fews consider that it is better to have an average manager than extraordinary managers would rapidly lead to turnover, right? Initiative. Initiative within the limits of authority and discipline increases the zeal and energy of the human element. Theol describes initiative as one of the satisfaction for an intelligent man to experience. The management should encourage employees to take initiative so that they can bring something new to the table. And last one is Esprit de Corps, which means team spirit and unionist strength. It encourages the spirit and devotion that is required to ensure group harmony. So these are the 14 principles given by Henry Fayol. So now let's move ahead with the other slides. Bureaucracy. So just like Taylor and Fayol, Max Weber has given this idea of bureaucracy. So Henry Fayol and F.W. Taylor has given about the scientific management and the 14 principles of management. Now Max Weber has given and emphasized upon the bureaucracy, right? He described an ideal type of organization that he called it is a bureaucracy, which is characterized by division of labor, a defined and clear hierarchy, detailed rules and regulations, and interpersonal relationships. So he recognized that ideal bureaucracy does not exist in reality, but rather represented a selective reconstruction of the real world. So the features of the bureaucracy that is being described by Max Weber are job specialization. So he by job specialization he meant that work is divided into simple routine and well-defined specialized tasks. So the next he said is hierarchy, which means positions and people are organized with a clear authority structure in a hierarchy with control and supervision of higher authority. Formal selection. By formal selection, he meant that employment and promotion must be merit based, right? If someone is getting employed and promoted, it should be on the basis of merit. Technical qualification can be one of the criteria of judging the merit of the candidate, right? Formal rules and regulations. A rigorous set of formal rules and regulations must be followed, he believed, in an organization to ensure and regulate the employees. Impersonality, which means superiors must conduct official duty with an impersonal attitude, apply rules and control uniformly, and avoid involvement with personal preferences. There should be no personal connection that should come in between work, right? The seniors officials should conduct themselves in a manner which is very official and firm. Career orientation. Managers are professional and they work for a fixed remuneration and pursue their career within the organization. You should be focused on your career rather than other stuffs like building relationship with the people or getting in along with others and so on. So the focus should be on the career. So that is what his bureaucracy was all about. Okay, so let's move ahead with the human relation or the behavioral approach. So the human relations school stressed on the utility of human relations practices like leadership, communication, and motivation. And the idea is to getting things done through people, right? So this is a logical extension of the ideas and experiments that were conducted out across organization and the experience of management theories and consultants. So this is considered a radical approach given the time because of the focus on psychological and sociological both of the processes. So according to this approach, the focus of management must be centered on interpersonal relation and getting things done through people as stated. So for the very first time in that era, people aspect of management was highlighted by this approach, right? So there are various studies which are under this approach. The very first one and the popular one is Hawthorne study. So what does this show? Okay, so the findings of Hawthorne studies have been labeled as Hawthorne effect. A Hawthorne effect is a phenomenon which denotes that employees work harder and perform better if they believe that the management is concerned about their welfare and the superior pays attention to them. And who is considered as the father of human relations approach? So remember the name Elton Mayo. So what was the assumption that was taken for this study? It is that importance of a team needs than money needs to motivate people to work. And the finding, as you can see, is that social norms determine the level of production and psychological ability of worker. Behavior of worker is significantly affected by non-economic reward. Individuals act and react often as members of group. People can exercise self-control. The next is systems approach, which means organization is a social system composed of people, groups, and their relationships. So this theory proposes that a system has a number of subsystems which are interdependent and each of which contribute to unique characteristics of whole system to achieve a set purpose. So what do you understand by the text that's written here? So actually the systems approach is an extension of human relation approach and views management as a social system. So this approach is very much influenced by sociologists, which aims at identifying various social groups with the fundamental belief in the need to solve the biological, physical, and social limitation. Okay, let's take an example. Okay, so take an example of a computer. We all have used computer in our lives. So there are a number of components in a computer like keyboard, mouse, CPU, which come together so that the computer can function. We can enter the data, we can draw, we can use the computer, right? But with advancement of technology, some of these things like keyboard, mouse, etc., got inbuilt into the system. However, we cannot use it without that. It's getting it together in the system, and that is how we are using it. So each of the feature is important for it to function, right? So the idea here is to stress on the need for understanding the individual, the group, and the influence of informal organization and the in the formal organization. Decision theory approach. It involves the application of sophisticated techniques for solving managerial problems. Example, especially planning and controlling. So this was proposed after the Second World War, decision theory approach, and it involves the application of sophisticated techniques for solving. So basically, it relies upon the existing body of knowledge to solve the problems. Mathematical quantitative approach. According to this approach, decision making is a logical process and can be expressed in terms of mathematical symbols, formulas, or models. Contingency approach is based on logic that every organization is different in size, scale, scope, purpose, values, attitude, experience, and therefore there can be no one best way to manage people, and it can vary according to by organization to organization. Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X represents authoritarian management style where someone is in the position and orders commands and everyone other employees are listening to them, and theory Y reflects the participative management style wherein other employees also participate in management decision functions. So lastly, I would like to conclude by summarizing that we have learned about Taylor, Fayol, and Weber's management style, Hawthorne effect. We studied systems approach, decision theory, mathematical contingency, and theory X. A question to reflect for you is to explain about the Hawthorne effect. And if you're able to do it, understand that you understood the gist of the session. So all the best to everyone. Happy learning, and I'll see you in the next unit. All the best.